Okay folks, this video has been a long time coming. It's time to have a talk about Sony, the company, the products, the service, no holds barred, how things stand in early 2020. So first off, acknowledgement, I've made loads of videos about Sony over the years, positive, negative, back and forth. I've bought and sold their gear, I've attended some of their events, but it has to be clear, I have never been given camera equipment by Sony and I've never been paid to promote them, and that's still the case today. The ups and downs of my reporting and my opinion of them has been based on my own personal opinion and my experience using pretty much every product that they make and most of the different products on the market that they're trying to compete with. And look, my opinion has gone back and forward over the years, from being an early adopter who bought into the system to then selling it all off because I felt I couldn't rely on it professionally. But honestly, over 2019, several things have become much clearer, and it's time to talk it through. First up, this video is brought to you by KEH Camera. They are the world's biggest used camera store with over 40 years in the business and over 50,000 items in stock. All the items are checked and sold with warranty, so whether you want to buy or sell, check them out at the link in the description below. So, Sony. Here are the main 7 issues that I've personally experienced dealing with Sony both in Australia and in the US over the past 5, 6 or 7 years or so. First of all, the first generations of camera had shocking battery life. They overheated all the time and they just had buggy software. Second, the first few generations of cameras had long lags, big blackouts, barely acceptable autofocus, but they still cost as much as the well-refined DSLRs that they were competing with. Thirdly, and a really important one in my opinion, right up until 2019, in my opinion, in my hand at least, the Ergonomics, the worst on the market. The grip size, the button placement, the button size, it's just not something that I want to be carrying around and have in my hand for a long day of shooting. Fourth, the lens lineup early on was really lacking, both in terms of range, professional options, and it was relatively really expensive. Fifth, the service was terrible. I put a video out in 2016 about customer service. It's probably still the worst customer service experience I've ever had. Completely unacceptable for a professional product. 6, the menus. If you've used a Sony, you know what I'm talking about. They're shocking. And 7 is the way they engage with their social media influencer army. So recapping, that is battery and heat management, speed and autofocus, ergonomics, lenses, service, menus, and their approach to social media. 7 serious issues, and I think, to their credit, they've pretty much resolved all but 2 of them, and they now stand alone as a true leader in the photography industry at the start of 2020, and the big traditional players like Canon and Nikon really had better step up, lift their game up if they want to be around in 5 years' time. And to that point, I've actually just bought a Sony myself to add back into my professional kit. Let's go through each one of those 7 points and dissect it a little. So first off, battery and heat management. So first of all, the NP-FW50 battery was terrible. It may have a stated power of 1020 milliamp hours, but you would end up carrying a pocket full of these things, like half a dozen or more, to do a full day of shooting, making excuses to DSLR users about, oh, they're just cheap batteries, it doesn't matter, look at all the features it gives me. But it was a serious pain in the backside, and that's before you got into video. The new one, what is this? The NP-FZ100 is about twice the capacity, but not that much bigger, and it really lasts a long time, really impressive, and they don't seem to be overheating. The heat management issue was mainly a video issue, and that seems to have been pretty much neatly tied up with firmware, and the later generations just don't have that issue anymore. That leads nicely into speed and autofocus, which is largely tied to software as well. Now, without a doubt, the Sonys have put Nikon, Canon, and every other serious player, Fuji, on notice. Their A9 is incredible, or it was when it came out, in terms of autofocus, overall speed, and lack of blackout. They really left Nikon with egg on their face after Nikon essentially announced the D5, saying how superior DSLR technology was because mirrorless had these blackouts and was slow. The A9 is faster, it tracks better, and it now has 0 blackout. It's It's just an amazing camera, and that issue is pretty much gone. They're leading the pack, and that's before we talk about autofocus, which is, again, just revolutionary, and the others are now having to try and catch up. Ergonomics, now for me, this was maybe one of the biggest issues. Having something in your hand all day for 12 hours when you're in the field, you want it to actually feel good in your hand. And coming from DSLRs, they just didn't. And I have to say, that was the case all the way through to the start of 2019. When Nikon and Canon finally got in the game and brought out their mirrorless cameras, they were already, I feel, ergonomically better than the Sonys were. But thankfully, with the A7R4, which is what I bought, by the way, and the A9 II, they're so much better. The grip is a world ahead of where it was with the previous generation of Sonys, and now it's right up there with the Nikon like Z6, Z7, in my opinion. Anyway, I still would like this to be that little bit longer, so, you know, I don't know if they're going to sell the little grip extension for this like they did for the A9, now that it has a chunkier grip, but other than that, they've really listened and improved it. Lenses. Now, for better or worse, Sony have been innovating like crazy, and they've now got an amazing range of lenses that cover pretty much every application and almost all professional use cases that I can think of. And now when you compare it to what Canon and Nikon are bringing out in the mirrorless space, they're actually not that unreasonably priced. And I have to say that huge turnover and rapid new model of camera bodies for Sony, and the new lenses all the time coming out, and the third-party lenses all the time coming out, means if you're a used buyer, you are in for a treat, because the used market is just full of great quality used Sony gear. Check out KEH Camera, and they have pretty much every different lens and most of the bodies available in multiples in terms of different qualities, and you can really save a bundle. I was personally looking at buying the 55 f1.8 Zeiss lens for Sony, and they have it up from, at the moment, it changes every day, $150 to $350 off the retail price, and they give it all with a 180-day warranty. As I say, they have literally dozens of different lenses available for Sony E-mount on the site. And of course, if you are looking to switch brands, if you're selling your gear used and then buying new equipment used, it's not nearly as daunting a proposition as some people think it is, that they're going to have to sell used and buy brand new. Anyway, check them out. Huge range, great deals, link below. Back to our list of issues, service. Now, that was sincerely a huge issue for me, and the primary reason that I dropped the Sonys from my Pro kit in 2016, I just couldn't rely on them for professional work. But that has all changed. Well, they're kind of middle of the road now, sadly. And I say sadly because whilst they've improved, the market has dropped. So over 2019, a bunch of authorized repair centers, notably for Nikon, closed. And pretty much now the big players have service centers in California and then either New York or New Jersey. And that's about it. If you need service in the rest of North America, you need to ship it to them. And to Sony's credit, from what I've heard, they are really fast with their turnaround times, getting stuff to and from the service centers, and good with loaner lenses if you're part of the Pro program. So that's another one of the issues checked off. In fact, that's 5 of my 7 points addressed, which you have to give them credit for. They have listened and fixed things, but I'd have to say the last 2 things on my list, I don't think they're ever going to get fixed. The menus, having used pretty much everything on the market, I sincerely find the Sony menu still the worst by far in terms of layout and how it is to find things and the overall logic to the system. I hate having to find a setting when I'm in the field and dive through that for 10 minutes to find where I'm going. But I don't think they're going to change it because there's so many Sony users, many of whom started with Sony, who are now used to that. They do understand it, and they're not going to change it just for the benefit of a couple of old Nikon shooters at the expense of their customers. And likewise, I don't like the way that Sony engage with social media influencers and Instagrammers and that kind of thing, but the influencers seem to like the way that they're engaged with, and it's clearly working for them, so I don't think that's going to change. But having said all of that, you have to give Sony credit. It seems like they've really listened to feedback and criticisms and complaints and seriously improve their products. It's not just that they're putting new sensors in and fancy new autofocus. The main issues that were holding them back, in my opinion, as an old fuddy-duddy DSLR shooter, have pretty much been addressed. And now, with Canon and Nikon finally joining the mirrorless market themselves, they're going through all the same growing pains that Sony did 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but they don't seem to have the same kind of momentum or speed at building out the lens lineup that Sony did. So I really hope that those guys take this seriously and knuckle down and put some energy into that. As a DSLR shooter, I don't want that market to dry up, but I do want the companies to still be around. And if they don't innovate, they don't pull their finger out and really get moving on this, they're in trouble. Now, please note, I am not replacing my Nikon or Leica equipment with a Sony. I'm adding a Sony kit back into my Pro bag. I dropped Sony from my bag in 2016 because I couldn't rely on it and I didn't want to gamble missing shots when I was in the field and I couldn't get the shot again due to equipment or service or whatever it might be. But now, in 2019, there were several different shooting situations where the Sony a7R4 allowed me to get shots that I know I would have otherwise missed. And for that reason, it does have a place in my bag, and there will be instances moving forward where I would choose to use that over my DSLR equipment and vice versa. Let me know if you would like to hear about those shooting experiences in 2019, what has led me to this decision specifically about the Sonys now that makes it a viable option for me, and if you'd like to know what I'm planning to add in terms of E-mount equipment to my bag. Big thanks to KEH Camera for sponsoring this video. No matter what brand you're using, if you're looking to buy or sell used equipment, make them your first stop for used gear in North America. I sold with them initially before we had a partnership because the process is so simple and it saved me so much time compared to selling it on eBay or Craigslist or something and having to deal with all those tire kickers and people not following through on the transaction. Since then, I've bought a bunch of different equipment from them and I've always been really impressed with the quality of the items, even those that are listed in, say, bargain condition, and everything comes with a 180-day warranty. So check them out, the link is in the description below, and if you use the code MATTG, you'll get an extra 5% off anything that you buy. That'll do it for now, guys. Cheers, Happy New Year, and let's go shoot.